What you pay for tomatoes could skyrocket when an agreement between the United States and Mexico on the price of tomatoes ends tomorrow night.
With nearly 70% of U.S. tomatoes coming from across the border, this decision could have a ripple effect far beyond farms, pushing up prices and thinning supply.
With tariff talks top of mind, South Florida farmers say they're in trouble. Crops are rotting on the vine, and they're blaming the ongoing trade wars and immigration changes.
Something unusual is happening across North America's farms. For decades, the United States has proudly called itself the breadbasket of the world, feeding millions, exporting billions, and leading in agricultural innovation. But today, that reputation is being tested. And it all begins with a simple red tomato. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary trade issue, but what's unfolding right now between the United States, Canada, and Mexico could quietly reshape the entire future of North American farming. This is not just about crops or markets. It's about power, politics, and survival in a system that feeds hundreds of millions of people. A few weeks ago, Canada announced a sudden import restriction on American-grown tomatoes. It wasn't a headline anyone saw coming. Officials said it was about product safety and pesticide limits. But trade experts across Washington and Ottawa believe something deeper was behind it. This wasn't about health or hygiene. It was about influence, economics, and leverage. For years, American farmers have relied heavily on exports to Canada. Nearly 40% of all U.S. tomato exports used to cross that northern border. For states like Florida, California, and Texas, Canada was not just a buyer. It was their most loyal customer. When that door suddenly shut, the shock was immediate. Trucks already on their way to Canadian supermarkets were turned back, warehouses filled up, prices dropped overnight, and farmers who had worked the same land for generations began facing the unthinkable, losing everything. Some called it a political misunderstanding. Others called it a trade war in disguise. Either way, the result was the same. Thousands of farmers across America woke up to a crisis that didn't start in their fields, but in government offices thousands of miles away. And while the United States struggled to figure out what went wrong, another nation quietly moved in to fill the gap: Mexico. Within days of Canada's announcement, Mexican officials reached out with an offer: steady supply, lower prices, and improved quality through advanced greenhouse systems in regions like Sinaloa and Baja California. Canada, facing the risk of rising food prices and supply shortages, didn't hesitate. They signed new contracts worth nearly $12 billion. Overnight, Mexico became Canada's primary tomato supplier. What was once an American stronghold turned into a Mexican success story. It wasn't luck, it was strategy. Mexico had been preparing for this moment, investing for years in agricultural technology, irrigation systems, and global marketing. Now they're reaping the rewards, but beneath the business side lies something more serious. The growing rift between two allies that once trusted each other completely. Canada's leaders say this is about protecting consumers. Washington, on the other hand, believes it's payback. In recent months, the U.S. protecting consumers has imposed several trade restrictions on Canadian goods, including lumber and dairy. Canada's tomato ban may have been a calculated response, a reminder that it can play tough too. For American farmers, though, politics offer little comfort. They're watching their livelihoods vanish while Mexico celebrates record profits. Trucks that once carried U.S. produce are now sitting idle. Processing plants in Michigan and Ohio are cutting shifts. Workers are being laid off. Small towns that depended on farming are facing their worst financial crisis in decades. It's a clear example of how fragile the global food chain really is. One country's decision can instantly become another country's opportunity. And in this case, Mexico sees that moment brilliantly. Their exports are booming, and they're even expanding into other crops like peppers, onions, and avocados, strengthening their dominance in North America's market. Take a second and hit subscribe. In Washington, officials are frustrated but cautious. Some lawmakers are demanding retaliatory tariffs against Canada, while others are urging diplomacy to prevent a larger trade conflict. They know that escalating this issue could damage industries far beyond tomatoes, but doing nothing could signal weakness, and that's a risk few politicians are willing to take. Behind the scenes, there's pressure building on the U.S. government to support struggling farmers through subsidies and emergency aid. Yet farmers say what they really need is stability, not short-term relief. Many of them are questioning how their country's trade relationships built over decades can collapse so quickly. Meanwhile, in Mexico, the mood is very different. Exporters are celebrating record profits. Greenhouses are expanding. And for the first time in decades, Mexican farmers are being seen as equal players in the North American food network. Some even call it a quiet revolution, a moment when Mexico proved it could compete not just in labor or manufacturing, but in agriculture too. Economists are calling this a turning point. They say North America's food politics will never be the same. Canada has now realized that relying too heavily on one source, the United States, makes it vulnerable. By diversifying, it gains flexibility. For Mexico, the win goes beyond money. It's a political victory, a demonstration that the new trade reality is multi-centered, not U.S. dominated. Still, the human cost in America is undeniable. Families who have worked the same farms for generations are now selling equipment just to survive. Truck drivers are losing their roots. Rural communities that once thrived on exports are fading fast. One farmer in California said, "We never thought we'd lose Canada. We always thought we'd feed them forever." That statement captures the heartbreak and disbelief spreading across America's countryside. What's happening now is more than a trade dispute. It's a test of loyalty, power, and resilience. It shows how global trade is no longer guided just by friendship or history, but by strategy and self-interest. The United States, once the unquestioned leader of North American agriculture, is being forced to adapt to a new reality, one where neighbors compete as much as they cooperate. As new deals are signed and new alliances form, one thing is clear. The future of food politics in North America is changing fast. Canada is now looking to Europe and Asia for additional partnerships. While Mexico is emerging as a key agricultural powerhouse, the U.S. still holds vast potential. But without stronger trade diplomacy, more industries could face the same fate as the tomato farmers. So when you see a tomato in your kitchen, remember that it's more than just a fruit. It represents an entire chain of people, policies, and choices that shape what we eat and who profits from it. One small decision in a trade office can ripple across borders, shift billions of dollars, and alter the lives of thousands of hardworking people. This is the new face of global trade, unpredictable, strategic, and deeply human. And that's why stories like this matter. Because behind every headline, there's a farmer, a family, a worker, and a nation fighting to survive in an increasingly uncertain world.
What you pay for tomatoes could skyrocket when an agreement between the United States and Mexico on the price of tomatoes ends tomorrow night.
With nearly 70% of U.S. tomatoes coming from across the border, this decision could have a ripple effect far beyond farms, pushing up prices and thinning supply.
With tariff talks top of mind, South Florida farmers say they're in trouble. Crops are rotting on the vine, and they're blaming the ongoing trade wars and immigration changes.